Hi, I'm Juliana Szucs with Ancestry, and I'm here with Donna Moughty, and we want to talk a little bit to her about Irish research. She is a professional genealogist, and she specializes in Irish. And Irish research can be a little challenging, I know firsthand.
Yes, it certainly can.
Do you have any tips for people who may be new to Irish research, something that may help them get over some of those stumbling blocks we run into?
Well, you know, the most important thing with Irish research is location. It's location, location, location. And that's really the most difficult thing for most people to try and find. Especially the famine-era immigrants coming over,
Right.
They were leaving terrible conditions. They wanted their children to be American, and they didn't really talk about the old country.
Right.
So none of those stories have been passed down in terms of where in Ireland their ancestors came from. So the most important thing is, if that information exists, it probably exists someplace in this country.
That's true.
So it's important to look at all of the records, not just the online records, but all of the records that your ancestor left, to see if you can find that. And you start with the oldest relative you have.
Right.
And I think we all regret the fact that we
Didn't do it sooner.
But we start with those, and we look at home sources, and then you work into the census records. And although the census usually only says Ireland, sometimes you'll get a county. It does happen.
I've seen that.
You know, and not with my ancestors.
Of
but,
course not. Somebody else's always.
It does. So you need to look at all of the records that they left, and that would include land records, probate records. It would include city directories, and especially,
I've had some luck with obituaries.
Obituaries are always wonderful. All of the basic, the death. I always start with death and go from death to marriage to birth.
Right.
And try to find all of those records. Also, military records, pension files. The files that are on Fold 3 can be absolutely wonderful. If your ancestors emigrated in the 1850s, they very well might have served in the Civil War.
Great. That's a great tip. So I sat in on one of your workshops on Griffis Valuation, and that is such a neat resource, and you had some wonderful tips. Can you share like one or two tips about using Griffis Valuation?
Well, you know, Griffiths, if it hadn't been for the destruction of all the records through the fire and the government destruction, we probably wouldn't talk about Griffiths Valuation.
Right.
But it is a tax list. Although it's referred to as a census substitute, it's important to remember that it is in fact a tax list. And I have a lot of people that'll come to me and say, but there's so many people of the same name, how do I tell, even if I know where they are, how do I tell which is mine? And there's some key things, because if you have 4 or 5 people by the same name living in the same area, the rules were that they had to identify them differently. So they had to add something to their name, what they call an ogdomen. So you may see, the one that we always hope for is the father's name. So you may see John parentheses Pat and John parentheses Michael. You know, something like that, which will tell you how to differentiate them. But if you have multiple people of the same name living in the same townland, they're the same people. And a lot of people don't realize that, but when you look at what their land holding was, they probably only have one house, and the other is land or bog.
That they were farming.
Right.
Exactly. That's a great tip. The other great tip that I really liked from that class was when you talked about looking for the names of both the husband and the wife in the same locations, because a lot of times they came from the same town in Ireland. So when you put those two names together, it's a little easier to identify them.
It really is. I mean, I think I use a great resource called Grenham's Irish Surnames. John Grenham did it back, I think, in the late 90s, and it's a CD. And as a Mac user, it's the only thing I run on Windows on my Macintosh, because I use it all the time. But if you have a couple that married in Ireland, if you know the maiden name of the mother and the child was born in Ireland, if you put both those names in, it'll isolate only those areas where both names fall. And since our ancestors over there weren't particularly mobile, they likely came from the same area. In the case of my dailies, what I was able to discover, there were only 3 areas. I knew it was the county Mayo, but there were only 3 areas where the name fell, 3 parishes. So it took down my research to only 3 places that I had to look.
Right. And I found even with mine, people that married here were from the same place in Ireland, because they settled with communities of people they knew from the old country.
Yeah.
So what's your favorite repository to research in Ireland?
It's hard. I mean, I love all of Ireland.
Yes.
You know, but my favorite repository is the Valuation office in Dublin. because it is the one place where if you found your ancestors in Griffiths, you can follow through, because remember it was a tax list, and they had to keep track of who was paying the taxes. You can follow that down to the 1970s in some cases.
Wow,
with
that's
all
fantastic.
of the people, and you can
Who
see how
lived
the
on that land later.
land passed down to. So it's probably my favorite, and it's something that for the Republic, the records for the Republic of Ireland, they aren't online. The Northern Ireland has put them online at Prone. So the ones for the 6 counties in the north are online to use, but the ones in the other counties, you have to go to Dublin to do.
Okay. So you organize a research trip to Ireland too.
I do.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I take a group over every October, and we visit. There's actually 2 trips. There's one to Dublin and one to Belfast. I don't do the Belfast one every year. It depends on what the interest level is. But I do Dublin every year. And we stay in a hotel right across the street from the National Library.
Heaven!
So, each day starts out with an orientation to the repository. We go to the National Library, National Archives, the Valuation Office, the General Register Office, the Registry of Deeds. Not everybody goes there, but people that do usually find it very helpful. So we have a chance to go to all of those different repositories to research. And I also have 2 dinners that go along with that, where I bring in local genealogists from the area. So Brian Donovan and Fiona Fitzsimons from Anaclan will have dinner with us one night.
Oh, nice.
Eileen and Sean O'Doul will have dinner with us one night. So it's an opportunity to
That's
share
wonderful.
information.
That's great. A great networking, and those minds of the genealogy,
I know.
the Irish research, if you could just channel all that information among those people and yourself. Well, thank you so much for sharing with us,
thank you.
and I appreciate you being here with us. Thank
Great.
you.